Hello, BookTube. I had a spate of errands to do first thing this morning, as early as I could do them, and they brought me nowhere near the Brattle Bookshop in downtown Boston, which is a used bookstore that I dearly love. I've been going there for well over a year now, and these errands took me nowhere near it. So I went to the Brattle Bookshop and I got a pile of books, and I want to show them to you. The Brattle is fantastic. They are three stories. The top story is collectible, rare and collectible books, pricier, but the sort of thing that you might get as a gift for that person who's hard to shop for, or yourself if you want to start becoming a book collector, a rare book collector. You could certainly build a little collection up there. But then there's two floors of the store itself that are crammed with books on every subject under the sun, except romance. Paperbacks, hardcovers, all reasonably priced and changing all the time. There's constant stock reviving at the Brattle. And also, next door to the shop, there's a gigantic lot of books, of bargain books. $1, $3, and $5, thousands of them, that are organized in no way other than price, so you don't know what you're going to find. It's not like you can look at one cart and write it off. You just have to look at everything, which is no great hardship for the bookish people I have brought there over the years. So I want to show you the stack of books that I got. Lots and lots of fun stuff. Starting with just about as clear an example of a BookTube made me do it book as I could imagine. The other day, I forget the exact context. One of you will probably remember better than I. But at one point, Piers Anthony came up. The science fiction, the fantasy author Piers Anthony came up, and specifically his Xanth novels. He did a whole series of novels set in the land of Xanth, where magic happens, where magic is real, and everybody has a different magical superpower. I forget the reason why these books came up, but at one point, those of us who've read the series, I got a long way into Xanth. I didn't get all the way to the end, but I got a long way into them, and a few other people did as well. And the consensus that emerged, kindly, not snobby, not angry, but the consensus that emerged is that they aren't good. And I know that. I mean, I might not have phrased it myself, but when I look back, I realize they're as thin as gruel. They're not good books, even at the beginning. They're not. And yet, in the course of that conversation, I said to somebody, I forget who it was, I said to somebody that I agree completely, there's not much meat on the bone there, but if I found the first Xanth book, with A Spell for Chameleon, with that classic Michael Whelan cover of our character talking to a manticore, if I found that mass market, which I remember so fondly from 45 years ago, I would probably get it, and I would probably reread it. I just assume that I'm never going to encounter it. I encountered it. I found the first Xanth book with exactly the kind of cover that I was talking about. I got this eons ago. When did this thing first come out? 1977. I don't know if it had this cover in 77, but soon afterwards it did. I got this, read it, talked about it with my science fiction fantasy friends at the time, and here it is. Because I only had to mention it to invoke it. But then this next thing is science fiction and fantasy, an author that I know and really like. But I've never seen this volume before. I had no idea what to expect of it. This is Roger Zelazny, who is probably best known for his Princess in Amber book, his Amber series. That is really, really good. It had a big one-volume collection that was quite enjoyable. He wrote a lot of other stuff. He wrote all the time, indefatigable writer. And this is a mass market paperback from, I want to say, the 70s. Yes, 1978. This is from 1978. It's the illustrated Roger Zelazny. And it is illustrated. It's entirely illustrated in black and white. There's a whole bunch of stories. They're all different artists. A whole bunch of stories, each one of which has its own illustrator. I've never seen this before. No idea how much of a beating it's going to take, but how fun it's going to be to go through this. What stories are in here, I wonder? This is illustrated by Gray Morrow. Okay, so it's just one artist who does the illustration, but he does a lot of color and black and white. Oh, and this is an Ace book, and it says that the stories are edited and adapted by Byron Price. So he must have gone through these things and picked out what we're getting. So what are we getting here? Shadowjack is in here. Then something called a Zelazny tapestry. I don't know what that is. Then an amber tapestry. Maybe that'll be little excerpts from The Princess in Amber. A Rose for Ecclesiastes is in here. Apparently the whole thing. The Furies is in here. Page 120. Page 129 with artwork by Michael Golden. It cannot be the Michael Golden. It absolutely cannot be. Or I have just found the buy of a lifetime here. Let's take a look and see. It cannot be, though. Okay, well, it would be very early. If anyway. And then The Doors of His Face, The Lamps of His Mouth is also in here. Apparently, maybe the whole thing? I don't know. The type is mighty small. The Doors of His Face, The Lamps of His Life, The Lamps of His Mouth is excellent, Zelazny. But I have almost no. I don't think I've ever seen this before. That's why I'm so flabbergasted. So I grabbed it. Tons and tons of artwork. Then we have another Viking book. Apparently, every time I go to the Brattle now, I get a Viking book of one kind or another. So I'm rebuilding a collection that used to be a whole bookcase. Fine by me. I think the Vikings are absolutely fascinating. They are incredibly interesting. This is an old Pelican trade paperback that once upon a time was the standard work. The thing about the Vikings is there is always a standard work, and then it gets replaced. It gets supplanted by something else. This is from, I want to say also the 1970s. 1960. And this is Johann Bronsted, The Vikings. Just in a Pelican trade paperback here that has... he takes you through all of the Viking world, all of the Viking artwork and activities. Like, for instance, when we get to the chapter 8 is about transport, and we get to ships, which is not a neutral subject for the Vikings. The ships of the Vikings were the supreme achievement of their technical skill, the pinnacle of their material culture. They were the foundation of their power, their delight, and their most treasured possession. What the temple was to the Greeks, the ship was to the Vikings, the complete and harmonious expression of a rare ability. That might be taking things a little too far, but I read this. In the 70s. Haven't read it since. And I'm not, as you might know, if you follow this channel, you might know, I'm not a big fan of the whole idea of histories becoming outdated. If they're written with energy and insight, and if they take into account all the material that the writer has at hand, so they're not actively deceiving you, then I don't think they do outdate. I'm as big a fan of Prescott and Gibbon as I am of any living historian. I don't know that it's right or fair for us to think of history that way. Then we have, those were the only two, well, no, let's move on here. We have history. This is a historian I have praised on this channel many times before. I actually don't have a copy of this book, and I certainly don't want this one. It was $1, so I got a placeholder that I will read until it falls apart, until I wait for a really nice edition. This is The Builders of the Bay Colony by Samuel Eliot Morison. In these old, this is a century edition from Houghton Mifflin, with a great blurb from the Christian Science Monitor that was not me. This is a collection of biographical sketches that Morison brought out in 1930, and has been reprinted many times. It will never be reprinted again. No one's going to reprint Samuel Eliot Morison anymore. But it's great. Everything that he wrote is great. And the neat thing about this is that these are long-ish profiles, 30 pages, 50 pages, of great figures in their day from the history of Massachusetts that they would get at most a footnote in a book now. But there's a huge amount of information. And, so the further back you go, the more you get Morison to just dig in to them. So who do we, if I remember correctly, there's almost nobody in here who is famous. I mean, you get John Winthrop, who's on the cover, but Master Thomas Shepard, John Hull, Henry Dunster, Nathaniel Ward, John Eliot, Apostle to the Indians, who has his burial spot is a minute from my door. Big stone monument to him. I got this. I would have got this anyway for $1. It's not marked up, and it will be a perfect placeholder until I find a really nice edition, something that I really like. But also, I got it because it's Evacuation Day. Which is a holiday here in Boston. None of the rest of the country cares about it or knows about it. But once upon a time, a long time ago, certainly at a time when everyone was reading Samuel Eliot Morison, Boston school children got half day on evacuation day and had to produce essays, presentations for class, that sort of thing. It's not known anymore, but some of us keep it dear in our hearts. So I had to get a Boston-related thing. Then we have a murder mystery, because it is, after all, March Mystery Madness. It says a piece of paper in here. Why do you have a piece of paper in here? Oh, how interesting. Somebody put a handout in here. This is book 4 in a murder mystery series. I didn't see any others there. I've read the first one in this series back when it was the Toast of Town. Back in the 90s, I believe. Let's see here. What is the date on this? Let's see here. This was copyright to the author in 1998 and then came out in an English language translation in 2005. This is The Death of Achilles by Boris Akunin, who did his book Winter Queen. Was brought out in America. It had, I think, a heralding article in the New Yorker. That was one of those rare occasions where somebody writes up an author and says, gee, this author ought to be better known. And suddenly everybody wants to read that author. Suddenly this author had a U.S. book deal. And all of these things started coming out. Now, I read Winter Queen. I don't know if Winter Queen had the same translator. This is translated from the Russian by Andrew Bromfield. I don't know if that had the same one, but I read it and thought, I read it not for an interest in the book, but for an interest in that phenomenon, where the New Yorker, whether it's Gore Vidal writing about the novels of Don Powell or whatever, some article in the Atlantic or Harper's or the New Yorker will spark an interest in an author that didn't exist beforehand. And suddenly the author has a U.S. presence or is reprinted and suddenly is being talked about again, however briefly. I was interested in that phenomenon. I didn't find Winter Queen all that good. And I don't know whether it's the author or whether they chalk it up to the translator. But I found this other one today at the Brattle for $1. So I would give it, March Mystery Madness had to be predisposed to read a murder mystery anyway. And I just noticed, looking through this, that somebody printed out a map of all the pertinent locations in the novel and also pictures of all the pertinent locations in the novel. How wonderful. In this novel, our main character is summoned back to Russia after years abroad. And apparently he is touted, the book is touted as the main character having lots and lots of really sharp detective abilities. I didn't notice much of that in Winter Queen, but maybe I'm due for a reread. But I have this. I have the 4th book in the series. I'll give it a try, absolutely. Then Pimlico trade paperback. I've mentioned before that I love. Oh no, this is Princeton. But I do have a Pimlico in here, I think, somewhere. Well, anyway, this is a beautiful trade paperback. This says Princeton, but I believe that this was Pimlico in the UK. This is by Peter Raby, and it is called Bright Paradise, Victorian Scientific Travelers. A collection of, again, biographical sketches of a handful of Victorians who went out and engaged in, went to the back or beyond to collect bugs or birds or beetles or whatever. And this gives you a profile of a whole bunch of them. Let's see here. Yeah, this is a Pimlico trade paperback. I don't care if it says Princeton on it or not. It's the exact look. It just says Princeton, but this is a Pimlico trade paperback. Let's see here. Do we get a table of contents to tell us who we have here? Oh no, table of contents, it is here, but it doesn't tell us who we're dealing with. Does the back of the book? No, the back of the book is just blurbs. Well, that's not very helpful, is it? But there's one particular traveler in here that I recognize. Actually, there are two on this cover that I recognize. I recognize that one, and I recognize this one as well. And the one that I want is Alfred Russel Wallace, who is the co-discoverer of the theory of evolution by means of natural selection. And he gets a chapter in here, and he is the subject of this book, Radical by Nature, big new biography by James Costa. So I was very happy to see this. I'd be fascinated to read all of these people. They really knew how to rough it back in the Victorian era. But I will go straight to the chapter on Wallace to start with for this book. So for $1, I wasn't going to go wrong. Then a piece of travel writing. Keep in mind, it's the middle of March. April marks the beginning of S&M Journeys, where Mark at Book Time with Elvis and I explore travel writing, where our S&M journeys are exploring travel writing. We are starting off with A Time of Gifts by Patrick Leigh Fermor, but there's lots of other travel writing. We'll be going at it until Mark is, well, I was going to say old and gray, but he's already old and gray. Well, I'll wear him out like I do, and then I'll find someone else. But I found a great example of what could be called a travel memoir. Certainly, the main characters in the book aren't moving around all that much, but this is J.R. Ackerley, the author of My Dog Tulip, who is something of a classic, and this is Hindu Holiday. His bigger book, this is a pretty paperback. It's thinner than a normal paperback. I don't know if you can tell here, but if you line up the spines, see that? It's thinner than a normal paperback. Very handy in the hand. I love Ackerley anyway, and this is the story of him being a kind of private secretary to a Maharaja in India. And it's wonderful, wonderful stuff. The copy that I had once upon a time didn't look anything like this. I don't know that I've ever seen this before, but I think it would count under a broad umbrella of travel writing. Then we have, I don't know why someone wrote on this thing. I'll see what I can do to get rid of it. But this is a really nice floppy trade paperback of the James family, a group biography by F.O. Matheson, who did American Renaissance. Somebody wrote a number on this. I don't really know why. I'll see if I can remove that. But this has the James family paterfamilias. This guy gets a lot. I read this when it first came out in I want to say the early 1990s. Oh God, no, 1947. Goodness gracious. Okay, I'm thinking of a different book. But I remember I read this. Maybe I read it in the 1990s. I remember that this gives a generous amount of space to the head of the James family, and then we go on to the famous siblings, and they all are treated wonderfully. This is a wonderful author, just marvelously readable. And I don't think I've ever seen, I know this book, but I don't think I've ever seen this version before. So I will clean that 9 off there to the best of my ability, and then I'll have plenty of Jameses to read about. Then we have a Tudor book, a work of Tudor history, hardcover for $1. I had this when it first came out. When was that? When did you first come out? 2014. So I got this as an advance copy from the publisher, and then I got the finished copy. I think I wrote about it. I don't know if I wrote about it for Open Letters. I might have written about it for some other venue. But this is James Evans, and this is Tudor Adventurers. Pretty much, you start a book with the word Tudor, pretty much I'm on board anyway. But this is about an expedition, a multi-ship expedition that left England. And they had 2 very different fates. One of those vessels had maritime adventures of the good kind, of the kind where you rack up the miles and you rack up the long tales, and then you come back home and you're fated and you tell all those stories. And the other vessels did not have that kind. They didn't have the good kind of travel story. They encountered horrifying hardships and misfortunes. And Evans does a great job with this. I don't know why I didn't keep this. As soon as I saw it at the Brattle for $1, I realized that I didn't have it, that I must have got rid of it somehow. Then this next one. This next one is pretty close to a Steve book. There are a couple of others here that are a little bit more of a bullseye. This is a story. This book tells a story that you can get one of 2 ways. You can either get it by going up to the old house up in Vermont and have me and Mark Richardson take you through it using condiment containers, salt shakers and whatnot, to show you the different things, the different positions, minute by minute. Or you can read a book about it. You can do it the boring way. This is by David Hanna, and it's called Knights of the Sea, the true story of the Boxer and the Enterprise in the War of 1812. That took place off the coast of Maine. This was one of the only naval battles of the War of 1812 that could actually be seen from land. Up in Maine, from Pemaquid, Maine, where the captain of the British ship Boxer and the captain of the Enterprise, the American ship, eventually realized that they were going to fight each other, and both of them were very young men. And I did not know that this book existed. I did not know that there was a whole book dedicated to that one battle that didn't even last an hour. I know that battle quite well. I know everything that the Enterprise did. I know everything that every Enterprise did, even the fictional ones. I know all about ships by that name. I am thrilled to know that there was a whole book about this, although the battle, like I said, lasted an hour. So I'm I'm assuming that this will be a large amount about the respective captains, both of whom I think were in their 20s when the battle took place. And maybe there's a lot, and there can't be much, this isn't a long book, but maybe there's a lot about the War of 1812 itself. Totally on board. No pun intended. Probably it will be the thing that I read first. Then we have this thing here. This I must have got from the publisher. I don't recall it, but I must have. 2009. Yeah, I would assume that I would get this from the publisher. But anyway, maybe I'll get into it. It has a foreword by Harold Bloom. Maybe I'll get into it and realize I've never read it. This is edited by Susanna Carson. A little bit of schmutz on the cover that we can fix. And this is a truth universally acknowledged. 33 writers writing about Jane Austen and why they love her. Yeah, this cover is a little bit worse for wear. Maybe I've never seen this. But I will clean up the cover. I will get the dirt off it, and I will gobble this up. Probably there are some things in here some appreciations of Jane Austen in here that I have already read. Who is in here? Yeah, Eudora Welty, The Radiance of Jane Austen, I have already read. Rebecca Reed, E.M. Forster, I have already read. Ian Watts, Lionel Trilling, Somerset Maugham, Martin Amis. But there'll be a lot of other people in here that I haven't read. And just their thoughts will be fine by me. That will be absolutely fascinating. Then we have we're getting close to the end. Don't you worry. We have some slightly odder sized books. I found 2 of these things that I absolutely was not going to pass up. These are not made anymore, as far as I know. This is the Penguin Atlas of Ancient History. These longer longitudinal trade paperbacks. Or the last time I had a pair of these, I found them at the Book Barn in Niantic, Connecticut. And these go through history. I don't want to block the bean. They go through history year by year and show you routes, maps, territories with tons of textual accompaniment. Just fantastic. Just amazing. This one is for ancient history. These are wonderful resources. And then I found one also for medieval history. Same thing. That just takes you through the various, so that you know what's what and who was where, when. And you get nice, generous textual accompaniment as well. Just fantastic. As resources, it was just fantastic. I remember that I have at times been irritated by them because they don't sit well on the shelf. They're long and a little bit awkward. But I think I'm a big boy. I think I could probably find a way to deal with that. Once upon a time, I had the whole set. There's, I think, 4 more of them. I found Ancient and Medieval today. I didn't see any others. I first got these at the Penguin Bookshop. There used to be a Penguin bookstore in Cambridge, just across the river. And I got the whole set of them there when that store had a massively complicated going out of business sale, and I worked the register at that sale. But I also sunk a huge amount of money into the stuff that was being discounted. Then I found 2 other oddly shaped books that I don't know. I don't know this at all. They're from a series called The Cambridge Introduction to the History of Mankind, topic books. And I'm a sucker for this sort of thing, but I did not know. I don't think that I've ever seen these before. One is by Ian Andrews. It is on Pompeii. And it is, see, there you go. Look at that. Oh my. That's not actually what you would have seen, but it's close enough for you to know what's going on. And here we have maps, diagrams, but also photography and original artwork, if I remember correctly. Yes. Original artwork in here as well. Fantastic. Probably for kids. And then the other thing that I got, again, I guess I am just fated for this to be a theme in every Brattle Hall, is the Viking ships. This is by Ian Atkinson. And I guess we already know, there's the Bayeux Tapestry. We already know how much the Vikings love their ships. So this will give you original artwork. Ew, wetsies. and also tons and tons of other stuff. You've got routes that the Vikings might have taken, photographs and archival stuff and whatnot. Fantastic. So that was 4 sort of weirdly shaped things that I don't mind having them at all. Then we'll finish up with something that we've been seeing on my library tour. We're done with my library tour, with this part of my library tour. New Yorker cartoons. I love New Yorker cartoons, old style New Yorker cartoons. I think they're fantastic. And I also love I love individual collections of New Yorker cartoons, but also individual artists. And this book, I saw the spine of it and thought, well, I love the title, so I will pull it out and I will take a picture of it to post on Instagram, my sexy Instagram account. And the minute I took it out and looked at it, I realized, well, you know, you can take a picture of it, but you want this book because this is actually a collection of New Yorker cartoons. It wasn't anything that rang a bell with me at all. It's by George Booth, who is, you know, was one of their iconic artists for decades. And it's called Think Good Thoughts About a Pussycat. And the cover is the prototype of Booth's signature grumpy dog. He's thinking good thoughts about a pussycat. I saw that spine and thought, oh well, you got to make a cartoon out of that. But this is just a collection of his cartoons, page by page. I will gladly take that. Absolutely. See, there's two ladies in frumpy hats looking at a cabinet full of guns, and the caption is approximately 1/3 of our income goes for defense. This is just going to be so much fun to go through, and I don't know for sure about the rest of these, but this is certainly going in the little book room. This is a keeper. I was surprised by it, but I'm glad. I was surprised in a good way. So there you go. That is a Brattle book haul. We have Think Good Thoughts About a Pussycat. We have the Viking ships and Pompeii in these old, are these kids reference volumes? Maybe they are. We have the Penguin Atlas of Ancient History and Medieval History. Great. Always happy to get these back. I'll try to hold on to them. We have A Truth Universally Acknowledged, a bunch of writers weighing in on their love for Jane Austen. We have Knights of the Sea, a confrontation between the Boxer and the Enterprise off the coast of Maine. We have Tudor Adventures by James Evans, worth a reread. Haven't read it in almost a decade. We have The James Family by F.O. Matheson, who's worth finding. If you haven't read American Renaissance, definitely do. We have Hindu Holiday by Ackerley. Kind of a classic, probably politically forbidden now, but I loved it. Then we have Bright Paradise, Victorian Scientific Travelers. Fantastic. I will go straight to the chapter about Alfred Russel Wallace, who Costa, in his new book, very concisely, very insightfully says that Wallace collected in order to travel. He didn't travel in order to collect. That is wonderful. You unpack that, you get to the heart of the man. Then we have The Death of Achilles. This is a Boris Akunin mystery, 19th century Russia. Give it a try. Builders of the Bay Colony, Samuel Eliot Morison. I will probably read a profile or two in here, but I'm not planning on keeping this book. I'm not planning on surviving either. It's not in very good shape. And The Vikings. Once Upon a Time, the seminal work on the Vikings, the seminal popular history of them. We have the illustrated Roger Zelazny, full of artwork, adaptations of his famous stories with artwork. And finally, just because I taunted the gods, A Spell for Chameleon with this Michael Whelan cover. An author, a series, a book that I've already admitted isn't very good, but I said probably if I saw that at the Brattle out in the wild, I would get it. And then I did. I promptly did. Amazing. But anyway, that was a trip to the Brattle, not entirely predicted, but I was happy that I went. Fine, mild spring day, shirt sleeve weather, so I had the carts to myself for a large amount of time. Perfectly nice, perfectly pleasant. Won't be going this weekend. No matter what. I know you don't believe that, but I'm not. It's Friday now. I will not be going this weekend. I think there's a lot of construction going on in town and on the subway. Do not want to run afoul of that. And I have enough books so to last me. I could read these books this weekend. I don't know which I'll start with. Knights of the Sea is sort of a given, but I'm really tempted with that Jane Austen book. That I might start with that as well. But anyway, that's a Brattle trip for now. We will reconvene at the Brattle next week, I'm sure. In the meantime, I'll wrap this up. I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.